Cyber attackers today are constantly innovating, experimenting with new techniques and exploiting fresh vulnerabilities. Too often, defense tools are scrambling to catch up, scrutinizing cyber threats they've seen in the past to try and prepare for the next attack. Known threats can be analyzed and fingerprinted, so that when a new attack that shares these same hallmarks appears, it is recognized as a threat. But the pace of attacker innovation means that this approach no longer works. Every day, new lines of code are created, new attack infrastructure is set up, and new strategies are developed, meaning that ransomware and other cyber attacks go under the radar. Darktrace's self-learning AI takes a fundamentally different approach. Instead of trying to predict the next attack by looking to the past, self-learning AI learns from its unique digital surroundings and forms an evolving understanding of your organization from real-time data. It analyzes every email and cloud account, every network connection and remote endpoint. It learns the patterns of life for everyone and everything in the organization. This allows it to identify subtle deviations from normal activity, which may indicate an emerging cyber threat, regardless of whether that threat is known or unknown. And the AI doesn't stop there. Thanks to its evolving understanding, it can also stop a cyber attack from spreading by taking highly targeted, proportionate actions on behalf of the security team. Critically, autonomous response technology allows normal business activity to continue without disruption while an attack is being constrained. Self-learning AI deploys from the cloud and continuously learns from your data. It can be applied to any digital environment that requires protection, from email and cloud applications through to internet-enabled devices and even industrial control systems. Darktrace's self-learning AI understands your organization, detects threats that others miss, and responds surgically so you can focus on what matters.
Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Tony Jarvis, Director of Enterprise Security here at Darktrace, looking after Asia Pacific and Japan. Today, really excited to be talking about cybersecurity as it relates to the metaverse and using artificial intelligence to detect unusual things happening and the capability to respond autonomously as we see those unfold. Really excited for today's presentation. Going to get straight into it. Let's start off by looking at what the metaverse actually is. Now, it's definitely worth asking this question because there is a lot of confusion around exactly what the metaverse is. It is still evolving. It is not a finished product by any means at the moment, but it does have a lot of promise, a lot of potential. There is the opportunity or the possibility to build up entire economies around the metaverse or within the metaverse. It has the potential to change how we work. It also has the potential to change consumer interests. So there are examples of things that have sort of gradually taken us from where we were into what might be some version of the metaverse. And they're some of the games that people have been playing, such as Minecraft, such as Fortnite, such as Roblox. And these are starting to emerge. But if you look on screen here, there are a number of questions that people do ask. And this is from a number of searches, 2.62 million different searches, showing basically that very few people do really understand exactly what the metaverse is all about. This means that there is amazing potential to be held. We're just not quite there yet. It is rapidly evolving as we watch day to day. Some are seeing opportunities and they're taking advantage of those opportunities, for example, cryptocurrencies. But again, it is very early days. Very exciting though. So what actually makes up the metaverse? What are the building blocks? What are the components that sort of build it out? Well, there's a number and you can see them on screen. I'm not going to read them out, but none of this is really new. It's existing things done in a different way with one or two exceptions. So we've talked about games like Second Life. You'll see some of these things making their way into the metaverse. They've sort of paved the way there. But essentially, it's a newer, refreshed version of the internet. It's three-dimensional. We have virtual environments that we can operate within. It's no longer simply text and images and video and other media. It's interactive. Many of this will use different technologies maybe we're not accustomed to using today. And they're going to include things such as augmented reality, AR, as well as cloud technology. There's going to be IoT, Internet of Things, and even artificial intelligence. That's all going to make up what will become our understanding of the metaverse. So at the moment, we can explore virtual worlds, we can play games, we can shop, we can even invest in the metaverse at the moment, invest in virtual real estate, we can invest in artwork. And you might hear people referring to things like NFTs, and that's exactly what they're referring to there, or certainly one use case. But there are security concerns that go along with this. Phishing, as an example. Phishing has been with us for quite some time. It will continue as we enter into the metaverse, and it will take on new forms. And the metaverse will give attackers the opportunity to perform their attacks in different ways. Maybe instead of reading an email, we're going to be talking to an avatar. It is still phishing. It's still asking us for information. It's still tempting us to do something. It may not be clicking on a link or opening an attachment, but it might be something that works against our security. So what are some of the implications here that we need to be aware of? Well, there's a couple. First of all, there is going to be an increase in what we call the attack surface, the number of devices we're using and any vulnerabilities that go along with those devices. And that means if we're using additional hardware, such as virtual reality headsets or smart glasses, any vulnerabilities in those are going to be something that can potentially pose a risk. So organizations need to be thinking how those devices and parties interact, because the attackers will make use of this. But there's also going to be greater amounts of personal information being collected. And there are some very good reasons for this. PII is an issue right now. It's been an issue with Web 2.0. Now, unfortunately, the metaverse is going to exacerbate this issue further. So it is going to continue to be something that we grapple with. Online services do collect and store our identities. They also store our browsing behavior, our personal data, and this makes it very convenient to use the internet. Makes tailored suggestions, for example, possible. But if we're looking at security, then we need to be aware that facial features, our biometric data can be exposed. And if that is exposed, it can potentially be used for fraud and impersonating our identities. And this can be used to make unauthorized transactions, which inevitably go back to your credit card or whatever payment method might be used. So yes, there are security considerations to be had. We've talked a little bit about phishing. Let's talk about how it has evolved over time. We know that at the moment, it is becoming more and more targeted. It's no longer a case of generic spam messages sent to everybody with no changes being made. It's very precise. Often the victim is researched. They will have a custom email written. We can even use artificial intelligence, the attackers, to craft these emails and make it look very, very legitimate, to the point where even seasoned security professionals might inadvertently click on some of these links. The English would be perfect. You can't just simply spot bad spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes. And the internet and the way it has been built up with the ability to register dozens or hundreds of domain names very quickly, very cheaply. And if any of these get found out, they can simply be burnt down and new ones be used instead. Does make it possible for attackers to have a fighting chance of having these attacks being successful. It makes it easy for credentials to be obtained. And that's why email is the leading cause of how an attack would likely get into the network or the organization in the first place. Well over 90% of cyber attacks do start with an email. Phishing is going to continue as we enter into the metaverse. It is not going away. It's something that we need to build our protections out further. And certainly, if we have this under control now, we can augment that as new protections actually come to market and get built out for metaverse-specific use cases. So if we talk about phishing in the metaverse itself, let's make this very specific now. This has been building out for quite some time. There was a case some time ago. I think this is last year or perhaps the year before. And this happens all the time. We have social media profiles being created with fake pictures, and somebody might reach out to a target, a victim. In this case, I saw it used to target soldiers that were actually deployed, in military operations. These soldiers would be tempted with these photos, with these social media profiles, to download dating applications, or maybe that's even how they met. And from there, getting tempted further to download applications to do a number of different things. It might be to chat, it might be something else. Unfortunately, inside these applications comes malware and the ability to monitor the GPS of their smartphone, the ability to monitor their camera without them knowing, the ability to monitor their microphone. And suddenly, all of a sudden, you're doing reconnaissance and collecting information about military personnel on the other side, your enemy. So we've seen this be used in the past. We've even seen, if we're talking about the metaverse and its various incarnations, Second Life, the application, the game, the platform, be used with a number of different attacks. So we've seen people offering updates, people offering free gifts, discounts, helping you get your avatar the way you want it. And in exchange for that, they say, well, look, we just want access to your account. And some people actually give this away. There's even additional methods of conducting fraud in the metaverse itself. And these include things like account takeovers. That's certainly nothing new to the metaverse, but it does apply to the metaverse. And things which we call rug pull scams. So NFT rug pulls. And this might be you buy an NFT and it comes with the promise of exclusive giveaways, maybe having early access to special games that are being built out in the metaverse. And as soon as you spend your money and buy that NFT, the developer walks away, they close up shop, they take the funds with them, and they can't be tracked, they're anonymous, and unfortunately the buyer is left without their funds and without anything to show for it as well. So you can see a little image on the screen here. This goes all the way back to NFTs first coming out. One of the very first transactions made was the first tweet from the CEO, the founder of Twitter, that sold for quite a hefty sum. And that was actually involved in fraudulent issues as well after the initial sale. So phishing is definitely going to be something that we do contend with here. If we are talking about a phishing attack, let's sort of go back and look at what we're doing today. How do we respond to phishing today? There are lots of different approaches, and these continue to evolve over time. One case that we saw relating to one of the customers that we actually look out for and actually help with their security involved an attacker getting into an organization. They'd gotten in before we actually had visibility across that estate. And they were going through emails. They were looking at what sort of things were being sent, what sort of things were being received. They identified one supplier related to this target organization and some of the invoices that were being sent. And basically what they did was they got hold of these invoices, they used them as a template, they changed the bank account details, spoofed a name to make it look like it was coming from a legitimate similar address, and sent it through, asking for a payment. We're actually asking for about $78,000 there to the victim who was used to receiving emails from this specific sender. And the sender account was exactly the same. Unfortunately, it was just a different individual using that account because that account had been compromised. Now, in this particular case, we saw that there were some things tipping us off that something wasn't quite right. There was a lack of previous correspondence in this particular email chain. There was a reply to what looked like an existing conversation, but it wasn't an existing conversation. It was simply a copy and paste with some details changed, trying to make it look like it was part of an existing conversation flow. We saw some email rules being set up to actually delete sent items as soon as they were sent. This is how attackers typically try to cover their tracks. And so you can see the image on the screenshot here is the investigative platform, looking at the emails, looking at what it was seeing, and giving a level of confidence as to how malicious it thought these emails were. And you can see a 65%, a 73%, these emails were held back. They were identified to be malicious, they were held back, so those malicious emails never made it through to the intended victim. This is what we need to be doing when it comes to the metaverse. We're going to need exactly the same level of protections, if not more, because we're now looking at the ability for attackers to do the same things they've been doing in the past, but doing them in different ways. And this is all going to be brand new territory for everybody who's new to the realm of the metaverse. And this is why awareness is also going to be critical, because not only do we need the technical capability to detect, but we also need the people to be aware of what to look out for as well. Now, let's talk briefly about NFTs and cryptocurrency, because with each of those goes the possibility to use these for cybercrime. And we end up with crypto scams, and we see many, many of these in the press. Couple on screen here right now. But if we think about NFTs, really at the end of the day, they're very similar to everything else we look at from a technology perspective. They are digital data that needs to be stored somewhere, and they need to be secured. Now, in March this year, not too long ago, a rapper, a musical rapper based in Singapore, so neighboring, quite close by, revealed that he had more than 20 ETH currencies stolen, and that equates to about $100,000 worth of NFT, and that was taken out of his cryptocurrency wallet. He had been the victim of a phishing scam, and this phishing scam was enticing him to click on a fraudulent link that he saw on Twitter, enticing him with some sort of promise of discounts or whatever it might be. And people see these and they click on it and they enter in their details. And those details then get sent to somebody else who's waiting for them. And now we have account takeover. Somebody is taking over their account. They can send all of those cryptocurrency, NFTs, and everything else I've got inside that wallet to some other address. On the right-hand side, you've got a tweet by Seth Green, and he had a considerable number of NFTs, $200,000 in this case, stolen. But very interesting, this one, because a collector had actually paid for those NFTs. It was stolen by one individual and paid for by somebody else. Now, in the real world, if you go and steal a painting, even if you sell it to somebody else, the original owner always has the rights to use it. So if it's found, it can be restored to, the original owner. When we look at NFTs, it's very different, because the NFT is the usage rights. So the holder, if this can be stolen and given to somebody else, the owner ends up with the right to use it, the fraudulent owner instead of the original owner. And this is really concerning in an area that lawyers are getting involved in, and maybe we might need some new regulation to protect against, but it is something definitely to be aware of. So NFTs and crypto scams do happen regularly, and it may not be possible, many times it's not, to actually restore any of those stolen funds at all. There are a whole bunch of additional risks if we're talking about crypto. Some of these on screen right now, which you can read. We've certainly got the financial side. We know that if you're making transactions using crypto, there is a risk. It's volatile. It's one price today, it's another tomorrow. Definitely a lot more volatile than a stable currency. So unfortunately, this is poorly understood by a lot of people, and so the risk is increased. There's also the risk of increasing attacks. We do see attacks increasing in number. So we see people going after crypto wallets, transactions using social engineering, and they're trying to take over these crypto assets. So we can talk about things like using multi-factor authentication. We can talk about proper cyber hygiene. We can talk about having security awareness and training in place so that people are aware what they can do themselves. The crypto exchanges or the crypto platforms are also something we probably should be talking about, because people tend to think that if you have something managed through a crypto exchange, they will do the security for you. The sad truth is that even the bigger ones can and do get breached, and money has been lost in the past and will no doubt continue to be lost in the future. Security experts may have different ways of storing their own crypto assets, but the majority of us rely on these crypto exchanges. So definitely something to consider there. And then finally, we've got the regulatory landscape. there are changes that many in power are discussing, and they would like to be seen to enact some changes for people's protection. So a lot of financial authorities are involved in these discussions, a lot of politicians as well, and this is on a global level. It's not just country by country, this is happening right across the world. So certainly a number of risks to be talking about. Now, if we're talking about phishing and what the outcomes of that phishing might be, well, phishing might allow somebody to take over ownership of your standard email address, but it could just as well give them ownership of your NFTs. It's exactly the same use case. It might even be the same sort of attack. So if we look at one particular case of a phishing attack, this is one addressed to McLaren, F1 racing team. And it came from a supplier that they knew. So again, that trusted relationship. They were sent an email, which was telling them they had a voicemail message and they needed to click on a link to retrieve that message. Not the sort of thing they typically got, but the email came from somebody they were used to receiving emails from. If they were to click on that link, it would have taken them to a landing page that looked just like Office 365. Now, if they fell for this and if they put in their email address and their password, unfortunately, this was not the Office 365 landing page. It was a page that looked as much as possible like the real thing, but it was not. It belonged to a malicious individual who was trying to harvest their login details. And with those login details, they could take over their email accounts. So we did see a number of things that actually told us here that it would be malicious. Using a number of different elements and joining the dots using artificial intelligence, we could tell that this particular email was out of character for the actual sender. Just the wording, what they were trying to do, enticing them to click on a link, just wasn't what they were used to sending or receiving. Hiding the link itself, using the text inside the email to make it so that you can't see where that URL points to, another thing. And there were others. So even though this was from a known correspondent, somebody that we might have trusted, it was in fact a malicious email and it was held back. So we are using artificial intelligence more and more to spot things that humans or traditional protections simply are going to miss. That is going to be even more important as we move increasingly into the metaverse, because there's going to be more at stake. There's going to be more information that can be leveraged for an attacker's gain and against a victim or a target. So artificial intelligence is definitely helping and will continue to help in the future. Now, we also need to talk about identity and safeguarding the identity of individuals. We know that history does have a habit of repeating itself. Every time there's been an instance of new technology, whether it's cloud, whether it's Internet of Things, it's worked its way into organizations. At first, they might have resisted, but now every organization uses cloud. Every organization uses smartphones. With these new technologies comes their own risks. The metaverse is going to be no different. So organizations need to start learning what those risks are. Identity is a powerful weapon. We need to protect it. So we can talk about things like multi-factor authentication. We can talk about passwordless authentication. The ability to use a single console for all of your different systems, a single pane of glass, if you will, for consolidating visibility and different systems and platforms. And then, of course, visibility itself. We've got all these different platforms and experiences in the metaverse. They're all being built out and very exciting, but they need to have interoperability built in. This way, we can make the gaps between them seamless, and we can do something about improving the security. Transparency helps. Giving others the ability to look at the code, probe it, see if there's any issues, if there's any vulnerabilities, and having those corrected is definitely going to help us when it comes to security. So last example here, if we're talking about account takeovers and identity, we can talk about those with Office 365. It's going to be exactly the same principle for the metaverse. It's still identity. One recent case we saw was an organization, again, another one we were helping, unusual logins coming from locations where logins for that user just didn't typically come from. The US or different parts of the US, Ghana as a different country altogether, and they were passing multi-factor authentication because the attacker had actually found a way in to change the telephone number of where those authentication codes went to. Very shortly after this, there were some email rules that were changed, and this included several different inboxes, so multiple changes at place. And again, shortly after that, this all happened within the span of days, different files being deleted. The attacker was trying to cover their tracks. So they were sending phishing emails out and trying to delete the evidence. Now, those phishing emails were impersonating the account owner, and this was all tied together using all of this different context, different events happening, artificial intelligence to make the correlations in real time. And even though this was over a very short period of time, it wasn't allowed to continue because this was in detect-only mode, but it still gave the customer the ability to go in and see what was happening and respond to it. And certainly if it was in a fully autonomous mode, this would have been dealt with much earlier towards the attack actually happening. So identity and account takeovers are going to continue to be of paramount importance. Last thing I want to close with here is the importance of zero trust. A couple of points I want to make about zero trust. First of all, with identity and access management, this is a fundamental principle of zero trust. Getting visibility into the logins that are happening. Who was logging in? Where are they logging in from? What sort of device are they using? What sort of security does that device have? Is it updated? Is it patched? What sort of permissions we have? What sort of admin changes are being made? Well, this can reveal whether we're seeing normal activity or abnormal activity. And similar things with the web gateways, not just the IAM, but the web gateways dealing with the traffic flows themselves, getting visibility into the remote users that we're seeing, the devices making these connections, and who or what they're connecting to. So this gives us the ability to look at insider threats, to look at malware. Zero trust really is going to be an extension of the perimeter. It's the new rules, it's the new patterns, and we need the visibility into what's going on inside there, both with who the people are and what they're doing. If we can see what that is, and if we can figure out whether it's normal or whether unusual things are happening, and then being able to actually make changes and actually take action, it will give us the ability to detect and respond to a lot of these things that without the use of zero trust and without this visibility may not have even been visible with other traditional protections. So it is going to be of even greater importance as we begin operating within the metaverse. It's certainly going to be exciting. There is going to be a lot of importance around security. That's what we're here for. We love to discuss and learn from others. And so with that, I do want to wrap up today. Thank you all for your time and hope you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you so much.